welcome back to the course. We are in module 3, consistency and creating consistent healthy habits. So lesson number 1 is going to be all around building consistent habits. I consider myself a really consistent person, but I have not always been this way. I've talked about before that at one point, the only thing I was consistent with was being inconsistent. I literally used to sleep through work shifts, classes. I was fired from IHOP for not showing up for my shift. Like, I have not always been a disciplined and consistent person. And I share that to emphasize the fact that it is a habit and a practice and a decision to become someone who actually follows through with what we say we're going to do. And there was so much power behind that, because once we are able to develop that skill and actually practice that to the point that we are that person, we can truly accomplish anything. So consistency is so key. There is a reason we say consistency is key, and we hear that everywhere, because that is the only way that we ever accomplish anything, the only way that we ever get to our goals. If you think about anything great that you have ever accomplished in life, chances are it wasn't just like a one and done, like you practice it once and you accomplish it. You had to show up and continue to do it day after day, even when it was uncomfortable and inconvenient. And it is no different with our health and weight loss goals. So in this section, I want to talk a little bit about what creates consistency, what sometimes keeps us from being consistent, and then also go through my consistency checklist that I am going to ask you to go through when we are done with this video and evaluate where do you still need some work to become your most consistent self. So to start off, what creates consistency? So in my mind, in my experience working with clients, many different clients, business owners when I was business coaching, with my weight loss and health clients, life coaching clients, it really comes down to a couple of things. Number 1 is commitment. I heard once on a Trent Shelton podcast that if we have a consistency problem, we have a commitment problem. If you think back to anything that you wanted to do or said you were going to do, but you're not actually following through with, if you really question, how committed am I? Did I make a full decision to do this ahead of time? Usually it's a little gray. The answer is like, maybe, sort of. I said I wanted to lose weight. Like, you didn't actually make a full commitment or decision to do that. So that is something that is so important. If we're not committed, we're not going to follow through, especially when it's not easy. The second thing that drives it is clarity. We have to be, and this goes back to the very first lesson we went through when it came to goal setting. We have to be really crystal clear so that we can visualize ourselves in that place around what do we want to accomplish, our specific goal, our overall vision, as well as the steps along the way, even if they aren't the ones that are going to get us there. We have to be really clear on where we're starting, even if they're not right or perfect. We have to be clear on the goal and the plan. So clarity plus commitment equals consistency. So we have to make sure that we have those two things. And then the third thing after that is practice. We have to become someone who is consistent, who follows through with what we say we're going to do, whether it's our healthy eating plan, our workouts, our business, whatever it is. And how do we do that? By repetition and practice. We have to make that decision that is who we are and follow through with it no matter what, the majority of the time. And then lastly is we have to know that there will be challenges. Every single day, there is going to be something. That's what happens. We make a decision, we put it out there, and like every reason to not do it comes at us, whether that's a circumstance or whether that's something in our mind, it is going to come. And we have to know that, we have to be prepared for it, and also believe that we can still do it. That is so important. The belief that it's possible for us and that we can still do it no matter what, because we are strong and we can continue to push through. And that any of those issues that come up, the excuses are not a reason to stop. They are a reason to continue, because that is where the strength and the growth happens. So that is really how we become our most consistent self. We have to make that full decision, that commitment to become that person. That is who we are, and we're going to start acting in that way. We have to be super clear on what we want, and then we have to decide to practice that on a daily basis and ask ourselves that question. What would the most consistent me do in this situation? I would keep going even though I don't want to. And we have to start to make that identity shift. And then lastly, we have to really expect those challenges and prepare ourselves for them ahead of time. Like we talked about earlier on, our brain doesn't know the difference between imagination and reality. So once we have rehearsed doing those things ahead of time, that we have a strategy for our obstacles, so we've thought through doing it, our brain is like, oh yeah, we've already been here. We already did this. And it's so much easier to actually follow through. So what are some things that keep us from being consistent? Well, we already talked about a couple of these. One would be our commitment. We're not fully committed. We're just kind of like, it would be nice to do this. The second is priorities. Sometimes we have too many priorities, or we haven't fully defined our priorities. So things come at us and we haven't said, my health is number one. So we just do these other things and we wait to have more time, but we're never going to have more time. We always have the set amount of time that we have. So we have to decide and plan around our priorities first. And I know sometimes it's really hard to do because we feel like, well, we want to be there for everyone else. We want to show up for our friends and our family. But if we do not make and take time for ourselves, no one is going to give that to us. So we have got to get really clear on our priorities and plan our time accordingly. A lot of times we have too many goals. We have competing priorities and we have competing goals. So I always encourage having one goal at a time, one goal you're really working towards at a time. That does not mean you cannot work towards other things. It doesn't mean you can't like clean your house or go to school or have your job or whatever it is. It means that like one focus at a time that is like super top of mind for you, that you're waking up, you're thinking about it, during your day, you're thinking about it. I encourage having one, because otherwise some of them are going to get lost some of the time. A couple other reasons that sometimes we're not consistent is it feels hard and we just don't feel like it. Well, that's not a problem. It doesn't feel a problem unless we make it one. We forget, so we have to set up a way to remember that we are working towards this thing and is this important to us. Sometimes we let life get in the way. And when that happens, we have to make a conscious decision now to check in with our thinking, like we talked about in the mindset section. It is always a thought and not a thing. So I included my power questions in the resources section. And that is something I love to use when something happens and I'm feeling really stuck and kind of in a victim situation, of course I can't do this because my husband has to work late, I'm never going to make it to the gym. It's the questions that you can start to ask yourself to shift your perspective out of that place of, well, this sucks, now nothing's going to work. It helps you get in the right mindset to think in the direction that you want to be thinking to get you the results that you want. A couple other things are perfectionism. We want to have the perfect meal plan, the perfect workout routine. One little thing goes wrong and we're like, okay, forget it. Well, this isn't going to work. And then lastly, sometimes we just need skills that we don't have, like what we're talking about right now, the skill of being disciplined and the skill of being super consistent with something. And all of those are going through the process that I mentioned before, like being really clear on what we're working towards, making a decision that we are going to become that person and develop those skills and practicing it. That is truly what it comes down to. So I'm going to share my screen here and show you guys, if I can remember where it is. Yes, here it is. Give me 1 second. My consistency checklist. So your action after this is going to be to go through this checklist and see where you still need to do some work. And if you need some support on this, drop it in the Facebook group and we can talk through it. And then do your own work on these areas and see where you end up. So I will share my screen so we can talk through this. Okay, so you should be looking at the consistency checklist. And this is basically some of the strategies that I have put together for the things that I was talking about, some of the things that keep us from being consistent. So number one is, this goes back to the goal section we talked about in the beginning, is get really clear on what you want. Make sure you're really clear on what you want. Make sure you can visualize the end in sight and that you believe that it is possible for you and that you can do that. We want to be really clear on our why. So make sure that you have a really clear why that is your source of intrinsic motivation that really creates that feeling for you that drives action, that you are 100% committed. You're going to need to be, because life is going to happen and things are going to come up. That you've made a conscious decision, again, with that prefrontal cortex, that strategic, logical part of your brain. So when you're in the moment and don't feel like doing it, you're like, I already decided here. You're crystal clear on your plan too. What are you planning to do? Where are you planning to do it? And when are you planning to do it? It's going to be so much easier when you wake up in the morning to go do your workout or whatever it is for you. If you're like, I'm going to gym, 5 a.m., I'm doing resistance training, I already have the plan on my phone, good to go. You just need to put your sneakers on and go. It's going to be so much easier to do it than to have to figure out all of that in the morning. We're just not going to do it because it's way too much to have to do when we already don't want to go to. You have strategies for your obstacles. So you don't just have your plan, but also you have thought through strategies for what all of the things that might come up. So we want to walk through, if you have your eating plan, like we talked about in one of the last lessons, what are all of the obstacles that might come into play that will keep you from following through that plan? Write all of those out. What are the thoughts that are already coming up that might keep you from following through with your plan? And write all of those out. And then we have to come up with strategies for each one of those and play through in our mind actually following those. So when we get to the moment, it's that much easier. You know that your thinking drives all things. So, like we talked about before, not being consistent with something just simply comes down to a thought we're having about a thing. For example, we end up having to stay at work later, we have a late meeting and it goes an hour past the time it was supposed to. We were supposed to get our workout in, or we were supposed to go grocery shopping. And we have a thought, I guess I just can't do this, or I might as well just start over next week, or I'm going to go get pizza because I didn't get to do my workout. It's that thought right there that we have to catch. We have to become aware of. We have to start deciding what we want to think instead that's going to get us where we want to go. We know that our thinking drives all things, and it's not about the things outside of us. It is about what is going on up here and how we can shift that. That is where the change truly happens. Your goal is your top priority, and you prioritize it. You set boundaries, you say no to things, because every single time we say yes to someone else, we're saying yes to someone else, we're saying no to ourselves. Now, if it's something that is in line with your values and your goals and your priorities, amazing. But a lot of times, a lot of us are saying yes to things that we don't want to do because we feel like we should do them and we don't want to say no. You're prepared for challenges like we talked about before. There are always going to be challenges and excuses that come up and reasons why we shouldn't do something. We have to be fully prepared for those and have our strategies ready to go, our thought strategies, as well as the actions that we're actually going to take to combat those. You're starting where you are. Like, we're not going from 0 to 100 overnight unless you literally do nothing else and you want to completely revamp your life and you are all up for this. But otherwise, most of the time, I see it work best for people when we drink 0 ounces of water. Maybe we start with 8 ounces of water versus trying to drink a gallon. It depends on your lifestyle, depends on your personality. But for most people, let's start where we are and level up from there. And then we can always continue to add on versus having to start back over at square one. You have a daily goals and visualization practice, like we talked about in the beginning with those journal prompts. This is keeping it very top of mind for you and reaffirming every single day that you are being super intentional and making this a priority for your life. We talked about this before. You have one main goal at a time. We're going to talk about this a little bit more in a further lesson. You're willing to let go of perfectionism. When things do not work out, when you don't get to the gym, it's not like, let's throw in the towel and let's give up on this. We're not throwing out the baby with the bathwater. I love that phrase. I don't know why. We are literally just deciding, okay, well, that didn't work. Let's make the next best choice. How can we just pivot from here and move on to tomorrow or whatever that would look like? We're willing to be patient and flexible. Weight loss, health, any goals, they don't ever usually work on our timeline. They don't usually work exactly how we plan them in the beginning. We have to be willing to be patient and flexible. What's working, what's not working, what do we need to change up here? And lastly, you're approaching it from a place of self-love and self-care versus destruction. We'll talk about this a little bit in lesson 3 in this module, but this is so important too. I always say we can't hate ourselves skinny or diet ourselves happy. Like, happiness and magical, like amazing life just does not just appear when you lose the weight. Like, I promise you, we are going to be the way we are on the way there when we get there. If you're miserable now, if you're unhappy now with yourself and everything else, it does not just magically shift like this when you lose weight, I promise. And we try to rush there because we think that it's going to. But when we just understand that it's going to be how we create it now or then, we don't have to rush so much. We also can work on really loving ourselves and caring about ourselves now, feel better along the way, get there quicker. And then when we get there, it's more sustainable, it's more long lasting, and we're in the place that we want to be versus still trying to get there. Otherwise, you're just always chasing after something, trying to get to the next thing. So your action from this lesson is the main things: clarity and commitment equals consistency, and that practice and repetition and be deciding you are becoming a consistent person. You are someone who follows through with what you say you're going to do. Go through this consistency checklist, see where you need work and do that work to become that consistent version of yourself. I also, like I mentioned, I've included my power questions guide. So use those when you are feeling stuck in